Hey, everybody. Welcome to Land of Lakers Live. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky coming to you after a Game 2 win, an exciting Game 2 win, a Game 2 win, Andy, that looked like it was going to be kind of a cakewalk there at the beginning, and then it became kind of not a cakewalk, and then it was nervous time, and then the Lakers clamped down hard on the Rockets in the fourth quarter. Final score 117-109. Lakers tied the series up at one. They've played two games, Andy. Each team has won one. By my math, that means the series 1-1.
Yeah,
correct me.
It was actually no. I'm not going to correct you. You've managed perfectly. It's the type of math that they can handle over at our sponsor, Delicious Pizza. When you tell them the password Cam Brothers and you get 20% off, they can do that math just as easily. They've got two locations: Hollywood, West Adams. Awesome pizza, awesome food. And you're not only supporting a local business, you are supporting the local business of a massive, massive Laker fan who is probably up right now just saying prayers to whatever gods that he believes in to try to get Dion Waiters through this groin strain. Because Michael Ross, the owner of Delicious Pizza, also Delicious Vinyl, who provides us with our podcast music, I think it's safe to say he's been questioning us a lot, trying to get to the bottom of the Dion Waiters situation.
He has a lot of real estate. He has a lot of real estate on Waiters Island.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He might have more real estate than Dion himself.
It's possible. So a lot to go through tonight. Big games for LeBron James and Anthony Davis. The Lakers went small tonight, but more as much by circumstance as anything, and we'll talk about that. Pace was a huge thing tonight. The turnover battle, which was lopsided in terms, especially in points off turnovers, Andy, heavily lopsided the Rockets in game one. The Lakers flipped it almost exactly in reverse in this one, which explains a lot of the win. But I think before we even get to LeBron, before we get to AD and anything the Lakers did defensively, we have to talk about Rajon Rondo, because this was the game that, the Rondo faithful, certainly the Rondo faithful inside the Lakers organization, because there aren't that many outside of it.
Yeah, I was going to say the right. Rondo faithful outside.
He's got family.
That's what I was going to say. It's family and closer. Basically, like the type of people that Rondo could have gotten away with in terms of getting inside the bubble. Like, it's people that are that close.
Exactly.
It's pretty strict rotations. It's pretty strict restrictions. Those are actually, that's the fan base that we're talking about in terms of the believers.
So, you end up in a situation tonight where, Rondo, after being just hammered after game one, where, he didn't play particularly well. And Andy, as as Frank Vogel pointed out, probably wouldn't have played as much as he did if Alex Caruso didn't have foul trouble. But regardless, he didn't play very well.
No.
And he was a negative on the floor, comes in tonight. People are expecting the worst, and was a massive lift for the Lakers. His overall stat line, 10 points, 9 rebounds. He was a plus 28 in 28 minutes. That is hard to do.
5 steals, 3 rebounds, only 1 turnover.
He is a huge reason, probably was as big a reason as any, that they got the lead that they did in the first half.
Him and Markieff Morris, another surprise factor.
Well, each of those Morris threes, and he had 4 in a row in the first quarter, were, I believe, all 4 of them were assisted by Rondo. At least 3.
They may have been. I mean, I know that the 2 of them were playing really well off each other. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact sequences of Markieff's threes, but either way, I mean, both of them provided not just a big lift for the Lakers, but a big lift that I think if you asked people internally, again, the Rondo faithful, were you expecting this type of production from either one of them? The answer would have been no, because you could not possibly have believed that was coming, but that was a massive X factor for the Lakers in this game.
Yeah. So, I mean, In the third quarter, when he came in, it changed a little bit, and he played down the stretch, and he was part of what the Lakers did well. I mean, you can't. It is unfair, as much as some fans would want to like point out the times when he's not doing well, and like ignore where he is on the floor when things are going well, whether it's because of him or not because of him. The point isn't, is Rondo the reason? It's also too, is he hurting anything when he's out there? And clearly 28, when you're plus 28 in 28 minutes, the answer is no, you're not hurting anything.
No, Rondo was a net positive in this game. There is absolutely no way around it.
Figuratively, literally. So I think, that third quarter, we started to see some of the problems. The defensive did some weird things defensively. Some of the choices in terms of the shooting weren't good. I mean, he was being left wide open and kind of putting up early clock threes that nobody liked them. And so what I think, and it was sort of a theme, I thought, of this game that will play out for the rest of the series. There was a lot of stuff where you could see exactly how the Lakers could win, can, and I think eventually will win this series. But you could also see some of the traps that they could fall into, even on a night like for Rondo, where he was totally spectacular in terms of his impact. There were still those moments where you could see where it would go wrong, and so to me, and we'll get to this later, ties into how fascinating this series is. But let's talk about what did you see from Rondo specifically that was helping so much tonight?
I mean, the playmaking. I mean, say what you will about Rondo in terms of his overall impact, and over the course of this season on both sides of the ball, he was often not helpful. And whether you're looking at particularly the advanced stats, but often just the eyeball test, you could see that there would be problems with him on the court. But he is one of the few guys on this team that can run an offense. Like you can debate how helpful it is with this team, and you can debate whether that is a net positive, that skill that he has. But he has it better than anybody on this team not named LeBron or James. And we saw during the bubble how awful the Laker offense was. In the restart period, I should say, before Rondo got back. And for certain periods against Portland, but especially during that restart. And I know I said a few times, on podcasts or things like that when you and I were talking, they miss Rondo. Like they miss that skill set. Even if you think I know this is something you've said before, that you think the point guardy skills that he has are overrated, or, that skill in general in today's NBA, it doesn't really exist the way it does 10 years ago. Whatever. Nobody else can really.
They don't have anybody else in the roster.
They don't have anybody else. And then tonight, Rondo definitely has, on balance, defensive issues, and there's going to be times less is more. Tonight, though, he created a lot of havoc for Houston. He got 5 steals, but it wasn't counting stat steals.
No,
these were often the results of Rondo doing really good things.
Inside the where Rondo really gets in trouble and causes trouble is it's like when he goes assist hunting on the offensive side, when he goes steal hunting on the defensive side, when he tries to be sneaky rather than part of the system. Most of the steals that he got, there was the one in the second half where he bodies up Westbrook and picks his pocket. Most of the steals that Rondo got were dropping down a level, following the path of the ball, anticipating a skip pass, whatever it might be. That's where most of those turnovers came from. Hold on one second. What can I do for you, buddy? Need anything? Okay. You want to go lie down? Okay. That happens sometimes when you have children, is they wander downstairs and they want to talk to you. So, but like when Rondo's doing that, it's all good. It's when he starts to kind of get outside the system, but he's not nearly a good enough defender anymore to be able to do that stuff. This was when people talk about what he does and how he can impact the game. We saw all the positive tonight and virtually none of the negative.
And I think what you're going to be looking for if you're a Laker fan, it's true. Get your kids under control.
That's true. You're right.
The worry that Laker fans have had all season, and you can stretch this back to last year with Luke and Rondo, is a guy around the league who has incredible respect. I mean, we've seen it among his teammates in the locker room. He gets respect among the coaches, I guess, except the ones that he feuds with. But assuming he's not feuding with that coach, they respect the hell out of him. And he is genuinely among the smartest players you will ever be around. I mean, like in terms of just his overall intelligence or intelligence on the court. Like when a guy like LeBron considers you
no, I mean, you're
basketball
legit.
IQ at your level, you are legit.
You're legit.
So what you're looking for, I think, as a Laker fan, in terms of keeping yourself calm with those presence. We've seen he's somebody that gets Laker fans nervous in a hurry. How much leeway will Frank Vogel give Rajon Rondo just by virtue of him being a veteran? You know what I mean? Like the idea that he will get more space for playing badly than, say, Caruso would get with mistakes that aren't as bad as what Rondo's doing, like that type of thing.
Sure. And I think, or how much leeway does he get when in those moments when he's not playing well? Like,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. Game 1, he was in part because Caruso had foul trouble. I mean, and that was
extreme foul trouble.
Right. And it was an issue. Game 2, he was in because he was playing well. And he needed to be in. I mean, so, some extra leash is probably to be expected, but not necessarily. It's a feel thing, and and from a Frank Vogel standpoint, you need something to drink. Okay.
Here's the question: like in terms of the leash,
go ahead.
And anybody who has a dog will understand this. There's 2 types of leashes you can have. You can have those like nylon just leashes. They're just like a normal leash. However long it is however long it is, and it doesn't have extra slack. There's also those extendo leashes.
Right, where the dog is basically, you're not really walking the dog at that point.
The dog can sometimes
you're just providing some sort of perimeter.
Like the dog can be like 15, 20 feet ahead or behind
least
you.
Yards.
Yeah, I mean,
yards.
The one that we have for our dog, there's at times where we're like on a different block.
Right, but your dog's
really not
legs
walking.
are this. You have a tiny dog. Your dog's legs are tiny. So I mean, like by your dog's standards, that dog is 40 yards away. That dog is a fly pattern away from you.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. So what type of leash is it?
And so tonight we saw, I thought Sunday's game was a reminder of the way that Frank Vogel did it throughout the season. We talked about just sort of the rotations, and it's been a big thing. And I mentioned at the top of the show, they went small out of circumstance, but also out of Frank Vogel's sort of pressing buttons. JaVale McGee out of the game, turned an ankle, correct, Andy? They were doing MRI, I believe, on an ankle.
Yeah.
And Dwight
and
Howard
actually, I thought JaVale had played okay in his minutes.
He did okay. I mean, again, it's not about points and this and that. It's about are you having an impact? Obviously, he wasn't hurting anything because they got off to a really good start.
I thought actually, again, it was small. It was a small appearance, but I actually thought JaVale played fine. So
and Dwight Howard ended up not playing, and so you look at it and you say, are the Lakers going small? Are they giving up? Because in the preview for this series, Andy, we talked a lot about with Kelly Iko on our Land Lakers podcast. We've talked about it on this show. A lot of this series is about who can get the other team to kind of blink from what they want to do. The Rockets have less flexibility in lineups they can deploy, but the principle is the same. And so you see Morris come out and play tonight, no Dwight Howard at all. You think, aha, the Lakers are going small, and they're bending sort of to what Houston wants to do. Yes and no. Second half, they're doing it because JaVale's not there. He can't play. And they were in part riding that hot hand because Markieff Morris played so well, easily the best game he's had since coming to the Lakers. So this is what Frank Vogel did all year long, which is feel out a game, use that bench, kind of mix and match. One guy one night, one guy another night. And tonight he hit the right buttons in terms of leaning on Rondo, leaning on Morris. The question is, can you do that through an entire series?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting though. I was thinking about this in terms of the Lakers. I think LeBron put it as they played in between tonight. In terms of really going small versus the way they typically play with 3 legit big men. I was thinking about it though. If they're in this middle ground, the way they played tonight, where it was largely Anthony Davis, Kuz, and Markieff. You combine that with LeBron, they're still a lot bigger than the Rockets anyway.
There's almost no lineup they can put out.
But I hadn't thought about it, though, really that way. until watching this game. And I mean, it's something that isn't necessarily that profound. I'm just saying I hadn't really thought about it that way because the Lakers typically play so much bigger than the rest of the league that when they go away from that, you tend to think of it as going small, but you forget the idea that they're bigger. And particularly against this team, they're still bigger.
It's part of what's fascinating about this series is because, you can kind of break down, like they come out in the third quarter, Houston does, and nail 3 straight 3-pointers. And the lead goes down from 16 to whatever that is, 16 to 7 in like 2.5 seconds. And you're like, oh my God, they got to pull JaVale off the floor and this and that. JaVale comes off the floor and the Rockets continue to hit 3-pointers. Like they are going.
And then we found out that it was likely because he turned his ankle anyway.
Right, but either way,
we didn't know in the moment.
Right, we didn't know, and one clearly didn't stop. Like, oh well, they can't do it with the 2 bigs out there. They have to change how they're playing defense. Well, they changed how they were playing defense, and it still didn't work. And I, Frank Vogel addressed this after the game. I asked a couple players about it. Part of what playing Houston means, and the Lakers benefited from it in the first quarter, where Houston was missing a lot of threes, and they weren't necessarily, super tightly guarded or highly contested. They missed a lot of open shots. In the third quarter, they made every open shot, and they did a great job moving the ball. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Rockets, but part of playing the Rockets is understanding that these flurries are going to come. And what we saw with the Lakers in the third quarter offensively, I thought was a part that was really interesting, because when the Rockets start pumping in 3-pointers and they start piling up points, all of a sudden the Lakers get really impatient on the other end, and they start taking early clock shots, and they either whether to try to sort of slow Houston down, they're not running as much, they're thinking. Danny Green said after the game, like, when they make shots, we still got to go. We got to go, and we can't stop just because they're making shots. And it's not just about fast breaks. It's about getting up the floor and playing with pace. Thrust.
Well, I remember,
as Rob Pelinka says.
I remember you and I used to talk about all the time. We covered the Kobe Powell era. And, those teams that went to the finals 3 straight years, won 2 championships. By definition, we're talking about an elite team, an elite core. We used to say all the time that we had never seen a team that used to use up so much of the shot clock accomplishing absolutely nothing. Or like remember, we used to joke all the time that like no team in the league used to risk 8-second violations more than those late. Like we were watching like Lamar or Fish or Kobe like just crawl the ball.
Fish would remind me periodically of that scene in Airplane where Johnny unplugs the lights in the airport, just says "just kidding" and plugs them back in. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and he's like standing there. And he like jumps over the line at 7.5. Just kidding.
I mean, we all the time we were like, "What the hell are you guys doing?" Like,
get off the floor,
right? So and again, that's a team that was championship caliber, not necessarily built to run. But the point I'm getting at, though, is often really good teams forget to get into their offense, to actually get going, to like use the time you're on the court efficiently.
What's in for this team in particular, Andy, we saw it again. First quarter was fueled. I mean, it was more obvious in the first quarter because they were causing turnovers. And again, we mentioned the stat earlier, that the Lakers really reversed that points off turnovers thing. Tonight, the Rockets had 16 turnovers, I believe, in game 1, and it didn't matter. Tonight, they had 17 turnovers, and Lakers turned it into 27 points. That's really the margin of victory.
Well, I mean, that live ball turnover thing we talked about during game 1.
Applied to Houston in the first quarter. Absolutely. Yeah. That was what was going on in the first quarter, particularly with Rondo. And so, you saw that. And then the game really shifted again in the fourth quarter when the Lakers had that 3-minute stretch or whatever it was, when the ball was just flying up the court. And again, they were finishing at the rim, but mostly it's about don't let Houston get into a defense where you can then put PJ Tucker down and let him get set, and the Lakers get kind of goaded into this sort of slow isolate AD thing or whatever. Get the flipping ball up the court and play with some pace. And those Lakers back then were much better in the half court. Like, this is a bad half court team. We saw it again tonight. When the Rockets caught up, it was in those stretches where the Lakers became a half court team. And so they can't let it happen.
Well, I mean, in particular, they have to be a half court. They got to move, and they also have to be a half-court team with purpose. Like Anthony Davis tonight, who was spectacular. His mid-range game
34 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, plus a block.
Right. He had his mid-range jumper going, and in particular, he had his turnaround going. Or he would drive from that mid-range position, or he'd sometimes pump fake at the top of the arc, then start driving. But we saw tonight, like, you can play AD out of the post as a pivot you want to, as long as it's going to be for quick decisions. Like the idea of having him down on the block to be the guy that you're running the offense through, leave that to LeBron. And even against this Houston defense, I would pick the spots where you do it, despite the fact that LeBron's so good at it, just because they have a lot of guys who are very good at dealing with posting up.
Right.
But that should be LeBron's
responsibility. It's worth pointing out, AD, like the Rockets are short. They are not small necessarily. And so they get the idea that you can just post. AD was hitting a lot of those turnaround shots he was hitting from mid-range got harder and harder as the game went on. Like you can't, I don't think you can just sit there and post up AD all game long because the Rockets are small. I agree with you.
No, but we have, however, seen though, if you combine, let me find this number that at Unwritten Rules put out on Twitter. In the playoffs, Anthony Davis is now shooting 61% from mid-range on 6 attempts per. For reference, Kawhi is at 47.5 on 5 attempts, and we've seen Kawhi is a damn monster in the mid-range.
We make a big deal out of it.
AD's mid-range jumper this season has not been great, but what we're seeing now is if he's consistently being guarded by guys 7 inches shorter than him, he'll be able to hit those shots.
He can shoot over. Yeah, I've heard people say, you can take advantage of the matchups. Like the Lakers can use their size, with JaVale and Dwight, particularly in transition, I think. But like the minute you start to get something into the half court, then you don't want to go to those guys for anything other than lobs. Let JaVale, who moves very well without the ball, let JaVale dive to the basket on a pick and roll, whatever it might be. And so that's sort of the thing. Like, and even with Anthony Davis, there can be that temptation to see that, he's being guarded by somebody 5 inches shorter than him, and not do the work of getting him to the spot where you can take advantage of that, or where the cutter can. There were a couple really good plays in the first quarter where he's posted up and the Lakers ran cuts around him so that the Rockets couldn't load up there. And then Davis can, you can run him through the post. But it's like if they just drop the ball off and stand still, which is kind of what happened sort of in the third quarter and in their worst half court moments, it's not going to go well. So they got to keep moving. Like they always have to be moving. That was the point that Danny Green made.
Speaking of moving, the defense that they played first, second, and fourth quarter was terrific. Yep. Third quarter, they had some issues. And it really hit me, both hearing like LeBron and Anthony Davis talk after the game about just how precise what they need to do is in terms of the rotations. Like I asked Anthony specifically after the game, like what was different in that one quarter. And he said that they just weren't getting the rotations down and hitting those spots the way they needed to. The way they were trying to trap Harden, but also Westbrook and even Eric Gordon against that type of spread offense is really hard.
It's hard. It worked. They had some success early in the game, but Houston, to their credit, adjusted to it. And as it went on, it became less effective.
Yeah, I mean, they still managed to pull it off in spots. And look, some of the time they're going to miss a rotation, and Houston's going to miss the shot anyway. I mean, that's the way this stuff works. They definitely, though, I think were really effective at bothering Houston over the course of this game. And you saw, like I think you had mentioned earlier, Rondo at times was picking up Harden like 94 feet the way Avery Bradley would if he were available in this series. And he's definitely the best the Lakers have at doing that thing. But it's just tonight's game really gave me just an appreciation of how hard defense is in the modern NBA. Like it's really difficult to cover that much ground, particularly against a team that doesn't just have shooters, but actually has in Harden, Westbrook, and even Eric Gordon, 3 guys who can move the ball.
Yeah, even the guys who aren't the guards, PJ Tucker is a very good. I mean, he's not putting the ball on the floor and but like he makes the right pass, sees it, makes it. Whatever. House is a good. Like all of their guys make that pass. I mean, look, this is a good team, and I was listening to Harden a little bit on ESPN. I was listening to Harden on ESPN talking about. The way that Houston was playing and what went wrong and all these things. And he just talked about the defense. And, Houston has been effective in this postseason in part because they've been so effective on that side of the ball. And tonight, I didn't think, there were moments, I think a lot of their problems were based on turnovers. So that's to some degree bad offense. Again, 27 points off turnovers for late. You can't let the Lakers have that. The Lakers shot 44% from 3-point range. That's not going to happen very often. But when you look at it from Harden's perspective, the Lakers shot 57%. Like that Houston is not going to win games in this series if they let the Lakers do that. I mean, I think you can sit at home if you're a Rockets fan and look at it and say, I'm looking at this. AD was 15 of 24. LeBron was 10 of 17, made it to the line 10 times. They got 6 of 8 from Morris. They got, the good performance from Rondo. They got 6 of 7 from Kuzma. All that stuff, and Houston was still in it in the fourth quarter. So, I think you take all of that home from the Rockets' perspective as encouraging, like that this is going to be is not going to be a cakewalk 4-game series, 5-game series, obviously not a 4-game series, but like it's not going to be a short series. Like, I agree.
Thank you, by the way, to the Nathan Mark, his comment. Good work, BK, getting Jason Statham on the pod tonight.
Stop sucking up. That
makes
Andy,
me happy.
Nathan
that
Mark.
makes me very, very happy.
It's nice.
Hey, true story. One time in Target, some stranger ran me down through this Target. He was like looking all over the place, holding a Jason Statham DVD to point out just how much I look like the dude, my hero, the guy that I have convinced myself I'm aging into. So you know what? Tell that rando in Target that I don't look like Jason Statham.
One random in Target does not mean you're a dead ringer for Jason Statham. Look, Andy, Jason
my
Statham,
mother-in-law
I understand why you would claim him. Yeah. I understand. Not just rugged handsomeness. Everyone wants to be ruggedly handsome, and then it's the badass factor. I get why you're claiming it. I get why you're clinging to this.
He's like everything that I aspire to be that I know that I'm not.
Yes, including ruggedly handsome and a badass.
Well, I will take.
You're not an ugly man. That's not my point. But I'm just saying.
I'll take. You can do worse.
Totally.
Maybe even one day I'll age into a lower middle class as opposed to just poor. But either way, thank you to the
Nathan Mark, all the way from New Zealand, I believe.
Yes.
Interesting comment from Johnny Barry. I do think the longer the series goes, the better the Lakers will defend. I think there is some truth to that. I also think that the Rockets are, they pose real problems for the Lakers, and the key is if they can defend, as they have been so far in the playoffs. This was 57% is not going to do it. I think they're going to be okay. The other thing that we didn't talk about in terms of reasons for the Rockets to feel better about tonight is that Russell Westbrook was awful. He was really bad.
There was
I know exactly where you're going with this. You're right.
There was that moment in the third, I think it was the third quarter. It was in the second half for sure, where Rajon Rondo got called for a blocking foul against Westbrook. And it would have been Westbrook's 5th foul if it had been a charge. And Frank Vogel challenged the call. And they ended up winning. And I tweeted this out during the game. On one hand, Russell Westbrook getting 5 fouls is a big deal for Houston. Right. On the other hand, if you're the Lakers, the way he's playing tonight, do you want him to get a 5th foul?
As well as Rondo played, was Russell Westbrook the best guard the Lakers had in the first half?
Westbrook
not an unreasonable question.
He is, and I said this also during the game, he is, for better and worse over his career, maybe the most relentless player I've ever seen in the NBA.
Right.
You saw the bad end of that tonight.
So before we go, I want to ask a little bit about we talked a little bit about the sort of the big small thing and whether or not is that really what the Lakers are doing. I think I do get the impression that Vogel's inclination is to go smaller more than large.
We'll see.
But we'll see. I mean, again, and there are numbers that a lot of people have been putting out that show they're better off playing big. Tonight it worked out. I don't know what the right answer is, because there are times, when particularly in the half court offense, where at the very least it looks problematic, like when Dwight's out there, because you don't want to put the ball down in the post. I will say this: the rebounding thing has not been nearly the advantage that people thought it would be for the Lakers tonight. They out rebounded Houston 41-35, which isn't crazy. Houston was pretty effective on the offensive glass. 8 offensive rebounds for Houston, only 9 for the Lakers, and the rebounding margin really comes from.
Well, I mean, to some degree, the Lakers aren't going to have a ton of offensive rebounds when they shoot 57%.
Correct, but and some of the total rebounding margin is because the Lakers shot 56%, 56.5%, and the Rockets shot 45%. So I mean, that's part of it as well. When you put all that together, the Lakers are not dominating the glass, is all I'm saying.
No, I will admit, I expected a bit more of a disparity.
I think everyone did.
I mean, it's similar to the way Rondo's minutes in game 1, the Caruso foul trouble, game 2, he played just really well. The idea of we don't know exactly how Vogel will use Rondo on a typical basis, just because both examples were really extreme in terms of circumstance. Tonight, in terms of what Vogel really plans to do, it's hard to know, because, he had said that he went into this game planning to play Dwight. Like, Vogel says that he always tells guys if he's not going to be playing them. I imagine Dwight was as surprised as anybody. I'm not saying that he was upset or anything, but I imagine he was surprised. It'll be interesting to see how, if extreme circumstances don't emerge, like JaVale's injury, and then also just how well Morris was playing.
But we also don't know if Frank Vogel was actually telling us the truth.
Right, because he has not said shit to us this entire time.
And he's not going to be like, just, I mean, like, the correct answer to that question is, oh yeah, of course Dwight was going to play.
You could ask Vogel
for all kinds of reasons. The correct answer is, so you don't tip your hand to Houston, so you don't make Dwight upset. Like, the correct answer is Dwight would have played if not for a fantastic performance from the other guy. And but that doesn't mean he's telling the truth.
No, I mean, Vogel, and I think we've made this very clear all year, and this reflects the coverage of Vogel. He is among the nicest coaches I've ever been around.
And have been very honest during the regular season.
And very accommodating. He has not been helpful in the playoffs in terms of what we do right
today
now.
In the pregame, I said, Frank, are you wearing pants? And he's like, I'm not going to get into whether or not I'm wearing pants or shorts under this shirt, below this shirt. I'm just not going to get into. I don't want to reveal that.
We can't. For people who don't know, we can't
see it. It's on Zoom.
Yeah. And Vogel's not standing. He's sitting.
That's right.
So you can't tell.
Keeping his lower hat. It could be, Andy, business on the top, party on the bottom, and we have no idea.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say with Frank Vogel, there's no way.
It's not a party on the bottom. But
I think Frank Vogel's business at the bottom or party at the bottom is very similar to his business at the top.
So you're saying he was wearing a second shirt when I asked him that question?
Remember Vogel said that after the Lakers closed out their series early, they had a bunch of nights off unexpectedly. And I think it was the Sunday heading into this week, they had a pizza party. That's the way Frank Vogel described it. It was a pizza party. He said that he and Tanya Ganguly, down in the bubble covering the Lakers for the LA Times, confirmed this. Pizza is hard to come by inside the bubble for whatever reason. It's just difficult to get. And Vogel, I didn't know this till now, loves pizza. He's not shocking, he's a pepperoni and cheese guy. Keeps it simple. But he loves him some pizza and hasn't had much down in the bubble. So they had a pizza party. I imagine for Frank Vogel, a pizza party is a wild party. Like that's the type of party.
Really, if you have like multiple toppings on each pie, like he really lets it down. Let's put some pepperoni and some sausage and some olives on that bad boy.
I am
maybe even a little
guessing
Parmesan.
that pizza party was very similar to Fogel's bachelor party. Like there's not much difference in one or the other. He's not a wild man. He's not struck me as a wild man.
All right. So last question I want to ask before we go. Obviously, we're 2 games in. The series is tied at 1. Both games, Houston, I think, took the Lakers by surprise a little bit in game 1, but game 2 was certainly very competitive after a terrible start for the Rockets. On the preview, did you say 5 or 6? I forget.
I said 5.
Okay, so you said 5. I said 6, but if you'd asked me, and I just tweeted this out, I would have said, because I always like to put series in these contexts. I say Lakers in 6, but if you made me choose, I'd say 5 before I'd say 7. Now, after 2 games, if you made me choose, I'd reverse that.
Okay.
Because I just think that Houston is going to be more consistently competitive in these games than before. I still think 6 is going to be the number. What about you? You obviously took 5. That's a harder haul now.
Well, I was going to say
4.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's off the table.
No, they could still win it in 5.
No, I was going to say 4 versus 6.
Right. No, they can't sweep.
I still think 4 in a row is possible.
I agree with you.
Because I agree. I think the best version of the Lakers is better than the best version of the Rockets.
Yes.
And while I think the Rockets, they played very well in game 1, and I've been a Rockets skeptic, but I also know what they're capable of at the top of their game. I just don't always trust them to be at the top of their game because their offense is so dependent on hitting threes.
Right.
And also too, we were reminded of this tonight where Frank Vogel, maybe because circumstances handed it to him, but he made some adjustments in the way the Lakers played tonight and the personnel that he put on the floor.
Yes.
The Rockets are by design not capable of adjusting. They can only execute better. They can't really make adjustments. And I think that is a serious issue to have in the playoffs. So I still think it is possible the Lakers could reel off the next 3 and be done with it. If I had to guess now, I would say Lakers in 6, just because 4 in a row is really hard, as opposed to just winning 4 games in a series. 4 in a row is hard.
Right. I mean, it's just, it comes down to, I think ultimately it comes down to, you assume Westbrook is going to have at least 1 or 2 games where he's significantly better than he was today. I mean, that's, I think those are things that you just sort of count on happening. But the flip side is the Lakers can do things better and all of that as well. It really comes down to, can the Rockets take care of the ball and can they play defense at the kind of level that they have throughout most of this playoffs? And if they do that, they have a chance.
Sure.
I think ultimately what swings it for the Lakers, and then what swings the possibility throughout the playoffs, is they have the ability to keep a team like Houston to 17 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Like that was like what they did down the stretch is, and for, that's sort of my last thing. Why I think the Rockets are not going to win this series.
Also,
I do think it could be hard, and I think they could put a lot of worry into the Lakers along the way.
It's not impossible. It's not right now what I'm guessing will happen, but I don't think it's impossible. We also, though, in terms of problems, we've really seen like the Rockets are just not equipped to stop AD.
No,
he is going to be an issue for them.
Yeah.
This entire
and that's
series.
Probably baked into their evaluation of everything that's coming.
No doubt.
All right, so game 3, which traditionally follows game 2, is Tuesday night.
Yes, it is.
A reminder to everyone.
Yes.
We are coming back. Like, these shows are going to be sort of happening, but different. Like, we'll be on after every Laker game, but it's going to be a little different. We're bringing back the late night happy hour starting on Tuesday.
We are.
Great set of guests lined up for our first week, and we'll just keep piling up every night, 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. The late night happy hour returns on this here Twitter feed, Periscope feed. We'll be on Facebook Live, all that stuff. Tuesday night we will be talking NBA though. Our guest will be Ben Lyons. So tons of NBA talk, tons of Lakers talk. So please come back for that. Stick with us for all the other guests that we'll be having, obviously during the NBA playoffs in particular. Lots of NBA, lots of Lakers. What we'll do in football, we'll mix in all that good stuff.
Yep.
The NFL, Andy, starts next weekend.
It's bizarre.
Actually, no, it starts Thursday, right? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know,
man. It's hard.
But anyway,
let me look this up real quick. We should know this thing.
I think
fantasy draft is tomorrow.
Tomorrow, right? So, yes, it does. So
clearly, both of us need to do a little studying.
I think that's probably true. So, late night happy hour every night, 10 o'clock. Same way you've gotten into this show, you'll get into that show. NBA talk, Lakers talk, all that. Thanks again to Delicious Pizza, 20% off when you tell them the Cam Brothers sent you, either using that online or when you call it in at either of their locations, West Adams and Sunset. I had some this weekend. It is delicious. They're not making that up. We'll see everybody Tuesday. Have a great night.
See everyone.